Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. This particular battle, I'll be playing Bretonnia with a bunch of Grail Knights, and I'm going to be facing off against a Greenskin opponent. So definitely a very fun matchup, and it's one that you don't see terribly often. So definitely enjoying and looking forward to this one. So as far as my army composition goes, I have a front line of men-at-arms with polearms. I choose these as opposed to the traditional spears. I mean, they are a little bit more expensive, but I simply choose them because they have higher leadership. And the armor piercing, though black orcs aren't terribly popular in this build, the armor piercing is still good against enemy leadership, orc boar boy biggins. And you know, a lot of these greenskin infantry, if we take a look, biggins do have 50 armor, and orc boar boy biggins also have 55 armor. So having any armor piercing, I feel, is pretty decent in this matchup. And these guys, they can last a little bit longer. And at the end of the day, the whole idea is basically these Grail Knights and really, really expensive mobile force I've invested in with a Paladin, King LOUEN, a second Paladin, and a Damsel. These guys are going to be doing the real heavy lifting. They're going to be taking out the leadership, battling the Orc Boar Boy Biggins. So at the end of the day, these peasants really just need to hold the line for as long as they can. They're not meant to win the battle. There are plenty of Bretonnian builds where you can go very, very heavily on men-at-arms and bring a ton of peasant bowmen and win that way. But in this particular game, I invested so much in these Grail Knights over here. So I do have the front line here. I have a Trebuchet, Peasant Bowman, King LOUEN, as well as two Paladins with the potions and Grail Knights and a Damsel. So I'm hoping these Grail Knights, with the support of the Damsel, the Curse of the Midnight Wind, to lower the Orc Boar Boy Biggin stats, in conjunction with the Sword of Corone from King LOUEN, will do the job. So let's go ahead and take a look at my opponent's army. He has Orc Boar Boy Biggins, just absolute beasts in this matchup. They will cut through the Bretonnian infantry so hard and are a very, very good choice. The Black Orcs, I'm not sure about this pick. They're not terrible, and you know, against King LOUEN and other troops like that, you know, Bretonnian elite troops, especially these Grail Knights, do have 110 armor. So if for some reason the Orc Boar Boy Biggins can't make the cut with their armor piercing, it's good that he has these Black Orcs in reserve, I suppose. He also has an Orc Boar boss, a big boss, two big bosses, and then three groups of Orc Boar Boy Biggins. So he's going very, very heavily into the Cav game, and he's going to try and win it, which is going to be a tough proposition considering I have two groups of Grail Knights, which are, you know, the creme de la creme of the Bretonnian Cav force. So anyways, our forces are going to advance on one another. You can see my Grail Knights. I'm just trying to goad him out into battling me because I really wanted to put all my marbles in this basket. Because this Damsel with the Curse of the Midnight Wind and the Sword of Corone, the stats on these Orc Boar Boy Biggins are going to be so darn low once the battle actually gets started. So I think he realizes this and just decides to advance his infantry force to quickly crush my very, very weak force over here. But I didn't mind that. So I do pull this Paladin over here. And what I like to do in this situation is actually land the Paladin. And you can see just that single Paladin landing diverges the charge of this entire group right here. So they get caught up here, and this other group's now getting like kind of blocked in the pathing, so that actually worked out pretty well. And on that same note, over here, the charge is about to take place, and you can see the Grail Knights get in there with King LOUEN. He uses the Sword of Corone right away, and it affects all of these guys. So minus 15 armor, minus 36 melee defense. So you guys can see their melee defense is actually at 0 right now. And their armor is down to 40 from 55. So pretty substantial. And that first group of Orc Boar Boy Biggins with those lowered stats just got destroyed. My opponent uses a very good Foot of Gork here and just absolutely decimates a huge number of my Grail Knights. I actually didn't see it. I'm not sure if it was overloaded, but you can see I took about 40% damage on both of these groups. But thankfully, King LOUEN as well as the Damsel and the other units here are doing a great job. You can see the Curse of the Midnight Wind. I waited for the Sword of Corone to almost wear off, and then I used the Curse of the Midnight Wind to kind of keep those perpetual long-term buffs on my opponent's force, and that lowers their melee attack to 34, which essentially almost puts them at 0. So that group is now routing off, and pretty much all that's left is the Orc Boar boss. So a very tough situation for my opponent here, but he's doing a pretty good job holding the line, to say the least. And some of these Orc Boars are coming back from rout, and you can see this group over here was like caught up on that Paladin for so long. It's pretty easy to forget about that, to be honest. And the Paladin did use a potion and heal up, but unfortunately these Orc Boars are a little bit too late to the party, and the Bretonnian forces as well as King LOUEN are going to get in there and do some good work. So as far as this frontline engagement goes, I actually decided to just turn and run, so I abandoned the Trebuchet here. So you can see the poor peasants who are manning the Trebuchet in a very Bretonnian fashion are truly being thrown to the dogs. So the Biggins here are going to just come and chop these guys down. You can see that guy got decapitated. That one just kind of got trampled there. So the rest of the peasants, I'm just kind of deciding to run them for as long as I can while my main force over here wins this battle. So then the ultimate dream is that these guys can get to like the edge of the map, which kind of sucks because if they get taken out, then unfortunately they're just going to route off right away and I won't get a ton of value out of them. So that's the one downside. But on a positive, it is giving my elite force over here a chance to win this battle for me. So right now you can see the big boss is low. The Orc War boss was actually, yeah, he's right here. He's pretty darn low, but he's shattered. So I didn't need to chase him and finish him off. So I decided to just kind of pound these big bosses here, and they are broken and terrified and whatnot, but they do have potions if I'm not mistaken. So this guy could most likely come back to the battle. Also, he has some Orc Boar Boy Biggins, which are also just broken, and I have pretty small numbers here, so if these Orc Boars come back, it's still going to be a fairly substantial threat. So It's definitely the return of the king. He's coming back to aid his troops. Very stylish Bretonnian rescue. You can see the Grail Knights and the goblins just kind of in the mix riding with the boys, but hopefully they'll be able to lance him down at some point. I know he's pretty darn low if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he's actually shattered at this point, so riding among the Bretonnian troops was definitely not for him. So I do see this Orc Shaman isolated in the back. My opponent reacts accordingly and kind of gets him to catch up with his main force. And right now I kind of ran out of space, to be honest. So the Bretonnian peasants are putting up their last stand here against the Orc Boarboy Biggins, which is a very bad matchup for them. The Orc Boarboy Biggins have such high combat stats, and the fact that the Orc Boarboy Biggins don't have armor piercing isn't really an issue because these men-at-arms only have 30 armor. You can see they're just rocking those little hats there. Definitely not much protection. So the Grail Knights, I do land one Paladin here because I wanted to provide encouragement to the peasant force, just let them last a little bit longer. And on that same note, my Cav and King LOUEN and other heroic units are going to come in and try and take out these Black Orcs while they're a little out of position. So I come in here, get a great charge with those Grail Knights, and they do pretty darn good shock damage. I believe their charge bonus is upwards of 80. That's 82, so it's very strong. So I use the Curse of the Midnight Wind to lower their melee attack as well as their armor, just trying to do as much damage as I can before his other group gets here. And then as soon as they get there, I know I have to run out because these Black Orcs, they are very tough troops, and they will definitely pierce the armor of these Grail Knights and King LOUEN and the Paladin and the other guys. So that was kind of my plan there. Unfortunately, you can see, as I predicted, the Orc Boarboy Biggins are just terrorizing my peasants. And this rear charge is just absolutely going to crush these peasants right here. So this other group, surprisingly, is holding the line. And these peasant bowmen back here are actually generating great value. And peasant bowmen are a great matchup versus Biggins. They will tear them to pieces pretty quickly with their missile fire. So they're coming in here, kind of wasting my opponent's forces away through attrition. But unfortunately, all my peasants, and like I told you before, if you do start close to the edge of the map, these peasants will just essentially rout off almost right away, and you'll lose a lot of value there. So right now, my opponent's forces, the Orc Biggins and the Black Orcs up here, were able to kind of fend me off a little bit, but I was able to kind of break this group, which was very, very nice. So I was happy about that. And again, at the end of the day, they're now isolated, and I should be able to finish them off relatively easily. So that was a pretty good choice, but you know, it's kind of a double-edged sword here because my opponent, I do still have some peasants fighting over here, so part of me wanted to go rescue them and rescue the Paladin to keep this sustainability for the long-term game, but then these Black Orcs here needed to be finished off as well, so very, very tough choice. But I think I actually decided to go over here and try and get this Orc Shaman because he's the only leadership that my opponent has left. So if I'm able to finish him off, a lot of these forces, you know, Biggins, you know, they have decent leadership, but, you know, they're even sub 50. These Black Orcs are around 50. And if they don't have the encouragement of this last Orc Shaman, I think King LOUEN and the other forces who do cause terror will be able to rout them off pretty quickly. So I do get a decent little dive on him, but unfortunately, he is far too close to his Biggins and Black Orcs here for me to really commit to that. So I actually pull out here, and I decided to just kind of reposition here, get these peasant bowmen firing again, and you can see they're going to just take some pot shots at these Biggins here, and that'll do pretty good. You'll probably see a few models go down right here, so yeah, that's not bad at all. And, you know, again, any damage that you can apply to these guys will slowly lower their leadership. So I'm just trying to get there. On another positive note, King LOUEN does cause terror, like I mentioned, guys. So a lot of these Biggins will be perpetually routing off. Unfortunately for me, the Black Orcs are immune to psychology, which means they're not going to be affected by terror-causing mechanics. So I do see this group of Black Orcs that I was focusing on earlier come back from rout. So my Grail Knights and King LOUEN get in here, and I knew I needed to finish them off. Because if he was able to get this group of Black Orcs with his main army, he would have been really, really hard to crack that army. But without them, he pretty much just has that one other group, and everything else is going to be subject to my terror and might actually rout off pretty easily if I can get that Orc Shaman. So the Grail Knights here are doing a pretty good job with their lances, doing some solid magic damage, and King LOUEN, of course, is just being an absolute pimp up on his mount here, doing some work. And of course, the damsel is still in great shape too. She's still alive, and usually I lose her pretty early in the battle, so I was very happy to be able to get that sustained value out of her for most of the game. So I do actually break those Black Orcs, and they'll probably be able to rout off the map here, but my opponent does come to their rescue. So it was actually a really time-sensitive situation in which I needed to get rid of them quickly. So at this point, I figured it was enough messing around. I needed to unify my forces. My opponent, realizing the threat of the peasant bowman, goes for them with his remaining Orc Boarboy Biggins, but they're taking arrows to the face. You can see that guy goes down pretty hard. And these Bretonnian Grail Knights are going to come in. And although I am going to lose some peasants, you can see the halberds coming in, King LOUEN's coming in, and this is definitely going to be the final climactic battle. And you can see the Orc hordes coming down the hill. Definitely scary. That's a lot of Biggins there. So definitely I was a little stressed out, but the Grail Knights are going in for their essentially their last stand. And I still do have a damsel, and LOUEN is going in here and using the stand your ground. And of course the peasant bowmen are still shooting, and of course the men-at-arms with the stand your ground buff, they're actually at 43 leadership. So with LOUEN's encouragement as well, they're going to be able to fight for quite some time. So King LOUEN's in here. He's in very good health, and if I'm not mistaken, he still has a ways to go before his regeneration cap. So I was very happy about that. But you can see the Biggins do great against the Braille Knights. It's pretty funny. against the Grail Knights. So, you know, it was a very tough situation to be in. But LOUEN, again, just generating huge value, and you can see just cutting these guys to pieces. I did realize the Shaman was back here kind of trolling me, and that buff right there, the Ere We Go against all these guys is going to be so good. But thankfully, I'm able to counteract it with the Curse of the Midnight Wind, which lowers their armor, and I do send a Paladin to go after this Orc Shaman. So at this point, he's wavering, and you can see LOUEN just pushing through all those orcs, not caring at all, and you know, terrifying all these biggins, and going right for that Orc Shaman, because I knew if I could get him, it would be over, and at that point, the rest of my opponent's army does rout. So it was a very well-played game, very back and forth, and we both invested very heavily in that cav engagement, but thankfully I was just barely able to eke that out. Even though my opponent did land an extremely good Foot of Gork, that was a really tough situation. But again, very well played to my opponent, Sombra. I look forward to seeing you again on ladder, and hope you guys enjoyed that Bretonnian game. Have an excellent night, and take care.